Okay, so let's get back to our diagram. We have these ideas that are stacking up. And by the way, this whole warehouse here of ideas has a name. Anybody have an idea what that name is? This whole warehouse of ideas. It is the product backlog. Thank you. Yeah. This whole section is the product backlog. Product backlog is owned by the product owner. They do what's called backlog refinement. Okay? If you're doing some research and you see somebody talk about backlog grooming, it's the same thing. Just kind of a new name, but backlog refinement. And refinement means that they're worried about splitting, sizing, sorting, sequencing, because they want the high value items to be sent to the build team first. Okay? Now, Dee mentioned this earlier, but I'm going to tell you right now, this is part of the secret sauce of what makes Scrum work and why we can make claims like Jeff Sutherland did, where we can do twice the work in half the amount of time, is because studies have shown over and over again that 80% of the value from the backlog is in 20% of the items. 80% of the value for the stakeholders in 20% of these items. Think about Microsoft Word. Think about all of the features that you can imagine that might be in Microsoft Word. What percent do you actually use? Probably pretty small, you know. That's that 20%. And so what this product owner will do is try to mine those 20% that are the high value stories, feed them to the team first. And what we end up is what we call a steep value curve. We get value early, that's the difference. The waterfall value came very late, and only one time at user acceptance testing. We push value very early and get it in front of the customer, in front of the stakeholder, so that they can see and they can inspect, and then we can adapt. Okay? And then what sometimes happens, this is quite common, is that this is why Dee talked about maximizing the amount of work not done. We don't want to do all the backlog because we know that a good chunk of those are delivering not much value. So when we get it in front of the customer, they see it, they give us feedback, and then they say, you know what, some of these things that we thought were so important, you know, in the very beginning are not so important after all. And we do what's called trimming the tail, that is cutting the project where we don't do some of these things that are nice to haves. Maximizing the amount of work.
Question on that.
Yep, yes, please.
So is that the mindset change that people have to get into, that just because it might be good for my area, something is in the backlog? Overall, we want to look for more bigger bang for the buck, and we're going to lose out sometimes on getting certain things done.
Yes, an element of that would be true. Let's hope that as we're building this product, that it will add value to all of us as a corporation. That would be our hope. But some of that may be true. And let me tell you a little story about that. This goes back to the product owner. I started the story about the anti process where we had 3 product owners. And so finally we discovered that this was not a good thing. And we went and got some more training. We got a different coach. And we picked one that we thought really should have been the product owner. And this individual turned out to be one of the best product owners that I had ever seen. And this kind of gets into your question here. We would always go out to the sites that are in a release and try to show them I'm talking about Polaris now, the 3M blueprinted solution, and have them respond with areas where they see gaps. Okay? And early on, the sites would have an approach where they kind of bring all of their requirements and say, these are the things that we need for Polaris to be for us. And this product owner was out at a site visit, and the one individual was saying, here's something that I need to have in the system. And she would say, well, why do you need to have it? And say, well, it was in the system before this one. Well, why was it well, it was in the system before that one. And it's kind of like, it ended up being something that in fact was a defensive mechanism to a defect in an old system. Had no value any longer, but it was carried forward because it was part of the process. It was part of their defined process, you know what I mean? And it's kind of like the story about the daughter who was baking the roast, and it's like, mother would cut off both ends of the roast, and she'd say, well, why do you do that? And she said, well, my mother did. And mother cut off both ends of the roast, why do you do that? My mother did. Turns out the mother didn't have a pan that was big enough, you know what I mean? So it's like, so we discovered there was no value. The product owners said, no, this is not going in a global system because it has no value. It doesn't add value to the corporation. So it was no, and it didn't go into the backlog.